So I had a request after some of the other videos I've done about conversations about certain exercises in the mat work. And someone asked me about, they gave me a list of 4, they seemed very disjointed. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh yeah, of course. So one of them was Boomerang and another one was open leg rocker. And then to me, that meant we also needed to look at balance control. And honestly, you can't look at any of those if you don't have the idea that rollover is about picking up your pelvis. So if you don't use, and that's not even said quite right, if you don't use your hamstring hip extension ability to allow the hamstrings to pick up the weight of the pelvis off your lumbar spine, then you won't have rollover. And if you don't have rollover, you won't be able to use the hamstring connection through the arms and open leg rocker to pick you back up. So that's one layer of open leg rocker that you really need to be able to have. So oftentimes people think that the most important thing to do is to grab onto your ankles and straighten your legs. And if you straighten your legs and you fall back, then you more than likely have lost that hip extension that you might have learned in climb a tree, that you might have learned even in the idea of leaning into one leg circle. As you take the leg around. And in the Center for Spatial Medicine's Contrology Pilates method, we really use the friction against the opposite leg and against the mat as a way to wake up the hip extension instead of overload the front of the leg. So if I were to go into rollover and I used my tuck of my pelvis instead of using the hip hamstring to pick up the weight of my femur and pick up the weight of my pelvis, then I'm not going to have the ability to then go into open leg rocker without collapsing my feet to the ground in the back. In Return to Life, we see this bend of the elbow at the back as an additional piece, and it's not to pull the legs down onto the mat, but it's to use the resistance of the legs coming down to pick up the pelvis even more, to stretch you higher up in your spine. So I'm going to do a couple of rollovers. I'm not going to take them fully to the floor because I'm highlighting the act of the hamstring to hold up the hamstring and adductor magnus to hold up the weight of the pelvis. So we've got the deep and the superficial back, deep front and superficial back, holding up that weight. So it's a very deep front line exercise as well as an arm exercise. So I'm going to find the press of my palm, the drop of my tail into the mat, the drop of my sit bones into my hamstrings to help me find my entire back line. And then with the press of the palm, I float the feet, take them over without moving my hands so that I stay in the stretch of the lat and the back line. I'm actually staying here so that my sit bones have a chance to sort of open and expose themselves in a way versus dropping myself into a really round shape that all of a sudden becomes heavy in my low back. So I'm letting my back stretch, but I'm not pulling my belly in. I'm not seeing how round I can get. I'm just in the support of my superficial front arm line and my superficial back line stretch. I would open my legs. In the book, it says as wide as possible. I'm going to stay just shoulder width for now, and I'm going to breathe into my back to start working my way down. You can start to see that there might be a relationship to open leg rocker. If you take your legs open, imagine my hands against my ankles, and I would need to be able to bring myself up from open leg rocker. Okay, now I'm going to actually go into, instead of open leg rocker, I'm going to take my arms around, and I'm going to start to really work on the hamstring hip extension, adductor magnus hip extension in both my right and my left leg, so that I can start to take the leg up. And even if I took my right leg down, it's not coming out of the stretch of the back line, which is bigger on the right than on the left. The reach of the left leg is what's picking me up, taking the weight off of my upper body. And I'm toying with that balance, that reach. This is, next to the last exercise. So you're fully primed to look for this quiet balance, right? So have that image, not of the leg being pulled down and inactive, but both hamstrings being there to pick you up, okay? But if I bring myself back into rollover, here I am ready to go into open leg rocker. So I'm going to bring myself up so that I can actually now play with open leg rocker. All right, so coming into it, we've just finished spine stretch. So we're down and as full into the opening of the back all the way through as possible. We add our hands in that transition, so I'm now touching my deep front line. And I'm using really strong sort of friction of my hand against my adductor, my deep front line, yeah. And I'm going to keep reaching my legs down into the table, and I'm rolling back. At a certain point, you see they floated up, and I'm still leaning into the back of the leg. And that's when I will come up into a bent leg position and start to play with taking my feet up. Now, I'm flexible, there's no question. However, if I am flexible and I hang back, I am not connected. I'm hanging out of my shoulder joints and I'm dumping down into my lower back. And what I really want to do is climb taller and get higher than my legs. So if you're a really long-legged person, you need to get longer in your torso before your legs, I might have to edit that out, before your legs begin to straighten. Okay, so it's being up. Now, if I go back and my feet hit the ground, which we've all seen, I'm not in that hip extension. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to stay in that hip extension. It resists the idea of the feet coming down. So when I bend my elbows, it's not pulling my feet down, but it's picking up my pelvis, which is causing me to have greater stretch around the upper back. Now, coming up is all about timing and coordination, which really is what we're working on in all of this. So I want to be in my arm lines to come up. And I want to climb higher and out of my lumbar spine. I'll roll back one more time, reaching out. Not dropping down, but staying in the hip extensors. Elbows widen to give room for the spine to grow. And then coming up from there. And I need to find that I hung out. It's harder for me to stay connected. There we go. Who cares if you don't get it on one occasion, but you get it on the next occasion? That's what it's all about. It's going to open up your back, teach you hamstring, teach you hip extension with adductor magnus and your hamstrings, okay? So this is a pretty long one because we were also supposed to talk about boomerang in this. But start to play with these three, and then we'll add boomerang in because it's the sort of the penultimate, although balance control is the penultimate. It's the penultimate one as you're really having to test, do you have the ability to lay your legs down in that hip extension lightly on the ground at the very end? And you're using your arms in a less available support way. So see if that works. See if that lets you find a different way to address those and have fun. So hope to see you all soon, whether it's on video or in person.